Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name's Don Arleth, and you're watching our 9 a.m. World News Service. EU leaders are meeting in Brussels today for high-stakes talks on the bloc's future, with Ukraine funding topping the agenda as U.S. support wanes. From frozen Russian assets to defense strategy and enlargement, the summit could redefine Europe's security and economic priorities. Now let's go live to our correspondent, Aleksandr in Brussels. Good morning, Alex. Now, this summit will be a make or break for funding for Ukraine for the next 2 years using frozen Russian assets. So what's the word on the street, and how do officials plan to get this done?
Yeah, good morning, Don. As we've heard from the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk posting on social media in the last few moments, either they spend money today or there will be blood tomorrow. That is the message from those member states pushing to find a way to finance Ukraine in the very near future. Ukraine will need the money next year and the year after to the tune of roughly 130 billion euros. Standing in the way, front and center, is Belgium's Prime Minister Bart de Wever. He is extremely concerned that the majority of the frozen assets are held here in Belgium, and therefore any legal or financial retaliation may be leveled against Belgium. He wants guarantees from all member states to cover the entirety of this loan before he moves forward on it. He was speaking in the last few minutes. He said there is no precedent for a move like this, taking these Russian assets to underpin a loan for Ukraine over the next couple of years. Therefore, he wants assurances from other member states. Well, in a slightly more collegiate approach, Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, saying that there is a way to find a deal on these frozen assets and that all member states will try to address Belgium's concern. Meanwhile, the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban says the deal is done. So we are absolutely on the verge here of a showdown in Brussels. The Belgian Prime Minister says he wants to see a new text in the next hour, Don.
All right, that's Aleksandr reporting there from Brussels. Of course, we'll be checking in with him many times throughout the day. Thank you, Alex. Freedom at last. 90 of 123 political prisoners released by self-proclaimed Belarusian President Lukashenko on December 13th have arrived overnight in the Polish capital, greeted by relatives and fellow activists after years spent in isolation. Video shared by Franek Vyacheurka, the chief political advisor to Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, shows their emotional arrival in Warsaw. Among them was leading opposition figure Maria Kalesnikava, embraced by her sister and Viktor Babaryka, greeted by Paweł Latuszka from the United Transitional Cabinet of Belarus, headed by Tsikhanouskaya. Following the prisoner release, which also included Nobel Peace Prize laureate Ales Bialiatski, limited sanctions relief was granted to 3 Belarusian potash companies on Monday, according to U.S. Treasury Department. Now, meanwhile, the European Union broadened its sanctions on Belarus to include the regime's hybrid warfare efforts. Jailed Polish-Belarusian journalist Andrzej Poczobut, who was awarded the 2025 Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought, was not among those released. On the eve of a crucial European Union summit in Brussels, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy delivered his latest nighttime address. Zelenskyy called on EU member states to agree to key measures that would convince Russia that continuing the war in 2026 would be pointless.
Today we heard another signal from Moscow that they are preparing for next year to be a year of war. These signals aren't meant just for us. It's important that our partners also see this. We need to watch out for Russia when it's in this kind of mood and react to it. It's when they are in this mood that they undermine diplomacy, trying to cover up their desire to destroy Ukraine and Ukrainians, their desire to legitimize their theft of our land with diplomatic formulations, with pressure on this or that point in documents. Security solutions are needed, financial solutions are needed, including Russian assets, political solutions are needed, and we need the courage of all our partners to see the truth, to admit the truth and to act accordingly. The outcome of these meetings, the outcome for Europe, must be such that Russia feels that its desire to continue fighting next year will be pointless, because Ukraine will have support. This depends 100% on Europe.
The U.S. Congress has moved to lock in America's military presence in Europe, pushing back against President Donald Trump's repeated threats to reduce U.S. troop levels on the continent. The U.S. Congress has passed a sweeping defense policy bill requiring the Pentagon to keep at least 76,000 American troops in Europe. The National Defense Authorization Act authorizes around $900 billion in defense spending and has been approved by a large bipartisan majority in the Senate. The move is widely seen as a rebuke to President Donald Trump's skepticism towards NATO and his comments that Europe needs to shoulder more responsibility for its own security. Under the Act, troop numbers in Europe cannot fall below the threshold for more than 45 days without special permission from Congress. The bill also includes fresh funding for military assistance to Ukraine and for strengthening security cooperation with NATO's eastern flank. Russia is preparing for yet another year of war because, according to experts, the country is unable to exist in peacetime. Colonel Vytautas Malinonis from the National Defense Foundation argues that war has become a method of survival for the Russian regime.
I think Europe must interpret this that Russia is not capable to exist without a war, because Putin has no chance. Even if he wanted, he cannot stop it, because it's like a bicycle. If it stops, the bicycle falls down. So war is movements for Putin's regime. So, and I don't think the negotiations are serious. They are just prolonging the time, and in reality, they just cannot stop the war. And war is a method of the survival for the regime, because all country is mobilized for war, all economy is mobilized for war, and they just cannot get to the same status what they were before.
Polish officials said that Interpol has issued red notices for 2 Ukrainian suspects accused of carrying out terrorist-style sabotage attacks in eastern Poland on behalf of Russian intelligence. Polish prosecutors say that last month, 41-year-old Yevgeny Ivanov and 39-year-old Aleksandr Kononenov orchestrated sabotage attacks targeting the Warsaw-Lublin railway line, a strategic transport link used to serve local communities and transport aid to Ukraine. They are believed to have fled over the border to Belarus following the incidents, which Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk branded state-sponsored terrorism. Officials say that both suspects have links to Russian military intelligence. Romanians are protesting what they call a captured judiciary, but some see these protests as a sign of rising dissatisfaction stemming from the austerity measures imposed this year by the government of Ilie Bolojan. While in neighboring Bulgaria, emotions are flying high in response to next year's controversial budget. Our Balkans correspondent Pavel Chaskovsky reports.
This is a border crossing between Romania and Bulgaria on January the 1st this year. Both countries celebrate becoming full members of the visa-free Schengen zone 18 years after they joined the European bloc. The year's end is far less jubilant though. In Romania, protests are entering their second week now, following the release of a documentary titled Captured Justice. The 2-hour-long piece, with almost 5 million views now, shows what is supposed to be systemic corruption within the Romanian justice system.
We are protesting for a fair judiciary, a judiciary for all.
But captured courts might be a catalyst for general dissatisfaction.
people are discontent, but I would dare say that it's mostly economic discontent, and the judicial factor can play a role, but it's not the primary, let's say, issue of concern for Romanians right now.
This economic discontent stems largely from the austerity measures that the government of Ilie Bolojan had to introduce in autumn to tackle Romania's soaring budget deficit.
It was a difficult year. We also started to feel the austerity, and considering the latest images, I am outraged that I am affected by austerity and that people with a lot of power get away with it.
The fragile Big Tent coalition that formed after the presidential election endures, but with pressure from the hard-right opposition in the parliament and growing discontent in the streets, Romania is to enter the next year rocking. Not unlike neighboring Bulgaria, whose parliament saw some unparliamentary scenes today. This is part of budget negotiations. The proposed 2026 budget is one reason why thousands have taken to the streets this month.
In this budget, we have taxes which supposedly no one was going to raise. And it turns out we're raising taxes. Surprise.
This eventually contributed to Rosen-Żeliaskov's government stepping down, making room for the 10th government since 2020. But even without the government in place, the budget for next year should be passed, and its revised version still causes altercations.
We witnessed the most brazen vote in this National Assembly. For the fourth time, the ruling parties are trying to push through the thieving budget.
And it seems that more opposition is yet to come, with protests scheduled for Thursday. All the while, there is a faint chance that a new coalition will be formed, therefore most likely in Bulgaria.
The 8th general snap election in 5 years will be scheduled next year.
Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
And over across the Black Sea, they are not backing down and continue to make their dissatisfaction seen and heard. Protests in Georgia are showing no signs of letting up. Demonstrators returned to the streets of Tbilisi for a 385th consecutive day, despite new police restrictions. Crowds gathered in central Tbilisi on Wednesday, marking the 385th straight day of protests in the Georgian capital. The demonstrations began after the government announced it would suspend Georgia's bid to join the EU until 2028. This week, police introduced new restrictions, warning protesters that gatherings on sidewalks without prior permission would be considered illegal. According to local journalists, the measure came into force on Wednesday, with at least one person arrested after police ordered demonstrators to clear the sidewalk. Rights groups and opposition figures say the new rules further limit freedom of assembly as pressure mounts on the government over Georgia's stalled EU ambitions. And it seems that Mark Rutte indeed will be visiting Poland today. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is set to visit the country. He will meet with Polish President Karol Nawrocki. Well, that's it from us for now. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.